Hey guys, what's up? This is Dingocrikey here with another commentary video. This time I'm going to be doing a review for episode 10 of Transformers: Robots in Disguise. As always, these reviews will contain spoilers for the episode. Not that there really is that much to spoil. Anyways, this week's episode was an interesting one, a lot of different things going on, but obviously the biggest one, the introduction of Jazz. Episode 10, we finally get another Autobot character introduced, and I was pretty happy with the way they handled it, but as usual this episode has its problems, so let's get into the analysis. And first up we have the plot. As far as this one goes, I thought it was just okay. Obviously, Jazz being introduced was a big part of the plot, and we find out that higher-ups on Cybertron heard about what happened with the Alchemore, so they're sending Jazz to Earth to investigate, and, he comes across Bumblebee's crew. Hence, Jazz is introduced into the episode, and I really felt like the whole backstory was contrived for this guy, just to get him in the episode, to sell the toy because he's going to be coming out fairly soon. They just didn't touch on anything about what was actually going on Cybertron, didn't expand this into a bigger plot line. I think this episode would have been much better off if they would have totally negated the Decepticon story, the whole Energon thief thing, even diminished the focus on Sideswipe, and gave us time to maybe not necessarily focus on Jazz since he is a new character and we kind of don't really care about him, but show his interactions with the Autobots, have him coming at the situation from a different perspective because he's been on Cybertron all this time, and get some good interaction and world building from that. And, this show likes to have humor. They could have had all the good interactions between Sideswipe and Jazz and even done more with the other characters. There was just too much in this episode with the Khan plotline, and I can't even remember his name. There's so many crazy Decepticons at this point. But we have Jazz showing up, this Decepticon wanting to steal the Energon, Sideswipe wanting to be different or something like that, kind of wanting to prove himself. I don't know. Just felt like too much for one episode. As far as the Decepticons plotline goes, it's just typical. It's what we usually get with a Decepticon. I did prefer it to last week's one. I felt like this one had more relevance. The Decepticon character was a little bit better. Not crazy about his design, but he was kind of funny, entertaining as well. I don't know if anyone else was thinking this, but I was wondering, when did the Energon cubes come into the show? I know they've been mentioned up to this point, but they really haven't been a focus, and all of a sudden they're a huge deal and the Autobots must conserve their supply. It kind of felt like a plot device, or at least like they should have introduced this earlier on or gave it a bigger focus. Still, with having the Decepticon plotline in there, it was exciting. We got some cool action sequences out of it. The whole tunnel battles, that was pretty cool. And then we had the Sideswipe thing going on, which I felt like was totally irrelevant. It seems to be the trend of this show to have characters learn lessons in different episodes, but there really wasn't anything for Sideswipe to actually learn. It felt like they're really just scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point and they need to move on to bigger stories. I think the characters could still use development, but what they've been doing has just been repetitive and it's kind of silly stuff at this point. First few episodes, I could accept it. Episode 10, I think they should be moving on. The best thing I found about Sideswipe's development in this episode might have not even been so much intentional, and that was him willing to sacrifice himself so the Autobots could get the Decepticon in the stasis pod. I did like that because in the beginning of the series, I couldn't necessarily see him doing that. So it is cool that he would do that at this point, but all of the other stuff with just being himself or whatever, I didn't get the point of it. It just, seemed like a filler character development story. The interaction between him and Jazz wasn't anything bad, but it wasn't anything too unique. I guess they aren't really friends as much as Jazz is kind of like a role model for him, as they noted at the end of the episode. So it brings a different kind of dynamical relationship to the show between, two characters who really haven't had that kind of interaction before. I guess that's kind of cool. Speaking of characters, this episode did do a really good job at giving everyone their own time. Sideswipe, Jazz, and of course Bumblebee got the most focus in the episode, but Grimlock even had a few funny lines. He seems to be the one who's pushed to the side if someone needs to be. He was still in there. Strongarm had a few lines, and Fix-It gets a lot of time as usual. Even if he's not the focus, he really got abused in this episode. Really felt bad for him this time. Maybe they're overkilling Fix-It's bad luck, but still I kind of enjoy it at this point. While Sideswipe's development wasn't necessarily great or necessary, he did have some really funny moments. Sideswipe is still a favorite in this show for me. Has some great lines, some of the best moments. Bumblebee, of course, is really cool. 10 episodes into this show, I'm a way bigger Bumblebee fan than I was over the past 7 years with the movies and animated and Prime. Not that he was bad in all of those, but this show has done so much more to develop his character and it's made him so much more likable, and it's really cool to see him in a different type of position. Then we had the Decepticon. What can I say? Just another Decepticon character. He was kind of funny. You did have the correlation between him and Sideswipe in the episode, but really, it felt like it was kind of fudged in there. Didn't feel that natural. Jazz, Jazz is cool, but he really isn't that much of a memorable character so far. He has a cool design. He's a different personality. He's happy, upbeat, confident, but knows when to get serious. Still, he didn't bring a whole lot new to the table. Like I said, they could have done so much more if they kind of would have expanded upon the Cybertron story. They just left it all up in the air, and hence Jazz feels as if he's the guest star of the episode. Like Transformers Robots in Disguise, guest starring so-and-so as Jazz. He's cool, but his introduction wasn't handled nearly as well as, let's say, Wheeljack in Transformers Prime, or kind of a side character like Sentinel Prime in Transformers Animated, who was definitely memorable and had overall story significance. They didn't seem to take any advantage of Jazz's role here. Humans, at least they didn't have a huge focus in this episode. That always makes them a little bit more likable the less they're in. As far as the action, I felt it was a big step up from last week. Some really cool fight scenes in this one. Not the best we've seen in the show. You had some stuff where they're just down in the stasis pod and you hear the bashing, and this Decepticon kind of takes people out really quick, so there isn't a whole lot of fighting with him. Still, Sideswipe sword action, that's really cool. I liked some of the situational scenarios in this episode, like the Autobots down in the hole, trying to figure out a way to get up. That was a lot of fun. It's always cool to see them in situations that they can't just solve by blowing something up. I felt like that was a big problem with Transformers Prime. Everything was solved by an explosion. Whereas this situation kind of reminded me of something we'd see in Beast Wars. There's this episode called Dark Voyage in Beast Wars where some of the Maximals are out on a mission and they get blinded and they have to make their way back to base, basically working together, or else, they're blind. How are they going to really fend for themselves? And I really enjoy when Transformers can do those kind of stories. Robots in Disguise has brought some of those to the table, so that is pretty cool. We do see Energons being kind of brought into the story. It seems to be like a plot device at this point. There doesn't seem to be a steady amount of Energon that the Autobots actually have. They just seem to throw it around for whatever's needed in the situation. Still, I like seeing Energon cubes. Maybe we'll get some kind of toy prop out of them. That would be pretty cool. Once again, they could have done so much more with Cybertron in this episode. Just mentioning it, but they really dodged a lot of that, so they missed a huge opportunity as far as concepts and plot lines there. Still, the episode had some great highlights, mainly in regard to Sideswipe. The opening scene where he's talking to them about motorcycle riders, and Sideswipe's like, oh, they want to be different. And at first it seemed like, oh, this is going to be some cheesy lesson right here. But then Fix-It mentions, like, why do they all wear the same jackets? And yeah, that was really funny. I didn't think of that before either. So Really enjoyed that scene. The action scenes with Sideswipe were really cool. All of his moves with the sword are always entertaining to watch. So despite the fact that Jazz was the new character in this episode, I really felt like it was more of a spotlight for Sideswipe and Jazz was just a supporting character. This one's a little bit of a hard one to rate because it's a pretty good episode. Not the best, but pretty good. But it had so much potential and it just really obviously skipped out on a lot of it, so I might give it like a 6.8 for that. Anyways, that's my thoughts on it. You guys can leave what you think in the comment section below. What do you think of Robots in Disguise at this point? Did you like the introduction of Jazz? Are the lessons in this show good for character development, or do they just seem like contrived kiddie plots? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below, and also tell me about any topic suggestions you might have pertaining to Robots in Disguise, Transformers 5, the Generations toy line, whatever it might be. Thanks for watching this review. Stay tuned for more weekly Transformers Robots in Disguise episode reviews, and have a good one, guys. See you soon.